classmate, is now the Congresswoman from Delaware. These years we worked together. I want to express my thanks in a particular way. We had the great breakthrough. Barack Obama became our presidential nominee. Doubts, hostility, and fears everywhere. Two sets of rules. You reached out to a man who covered the waterfront. The depth and breadth, trustworthy, became his running mate, and twice stood our nation to higher heights. We thank President Barack Obama for being president, for his choice of running mate, Joe Biden. Joe, in this challenge in labor union meeting, our focus is temporary workers as a working scam. Workers' right to vote is under attack. Right to work laws in the south of our country. People confusing Obamacare and affordable health care and all that goes with that. You have the stuff that it takes to make America better, and so Joe Biden, please stand and come forward.
Well, I'm here to introduce one of the Bidens who's going to become President of the United States, my granddaughter, Finnegan Biden from Chicago. If anybody makes it, this one will. By the way, I lost a daughter. I have one daughter that survived, and I have 4 granddaughters. And let me tell you, they're incredible. How many of you men and women have a granddaughter out there? And how many of you had a daughter as well? Well, here's the deal. Daughters always are wonderful. Matter of fact, we Irish have an expression. A son's a son till he gets a wife, a daughter's a daughter the rest of her life. But here's the deal. When your daughter is about 12 and a half years old, you put this little butterfly in bed and you kiss her goodnight. Next morning you walk in, there's a snake in the bed. Daddy, drop me at the corner. Daddy, don't wrestle out of my games. Daddy, Daddy. When they all come back between 19 and 21, my granddaughter, Congresswoman, comes in and says, "You're not hydrating enough. I got to take care of you, Dad." She's a social worker with a master's degree. But here's the deal. Here's the deal. Granddaughters not only always love you, but they always like you. Always like you. And by the way, she's in college. We're walking down the campus. She goes, "Can we hold hands, Pop?" Can you daughters imagine saying that to your dad? I love you, kid. And by the way, her mommy's from the South Side. Her other set of grandparents live here in Chicago, and she's a Chicago girl. Anyway, thank you very much for indulging me, Reverend. And always thank you for remembering my son, Bo. He was a friend of yours, and you took care of him, too. So thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Members of the clergy, Mayor, thank you for the passport into town. I appreciate it. Congresswoman Kelly is a great friend and a great congresswoman, and all the labor leaders here. There's an expression in parts of South Philly. Y'all are the ones that brung me to the dance, the African-American community and labor, and I'm not joking. Jesse knows my state very, very well. He knows that when I say I got raised in the black church, he knows I'm not kidding, because before we'd organize, you'd go in and sit in Reverend Herring's church and sit there before we'd go out and try to change things when I was a kid in college and in high school. But look, before I start, I'd like to say something about the debate we had last night. And I heard and I listened to and I respect Senator Harris. But, you know, we all know that 30 seconds to 60 seconds on a campaign debate exchange can't do justice to a lifetime committed to civil rights. I want to be absolutely clear about my record and position on racial justice, including busing. I never, ever opposed voluntary busing. And as a program that Senator Harris participated in, and it made a difference in her life. I did support federal action to address root causes of segregation in our schools and our communities, including taking on the banks and redlining and trying to change the way in which neighborhoods were segregated. I've always been in favor of using federal authority to overcome state-initiated segregation. In fact, I cast a deciding vote in 1974 against an amendment called the Gurney Amendment, which would have banned the right of the federal courts to be able to use busing as a remedy. And you might guess, in the middle of the most extensive busing order in American history in my city, in my state, it wasn't what you'd call the most popular vote in the country at the time. So, Reverend Jackson, we've spent a lot of time working together over the years on a lot of issues that matter. And I know, you know, I fought my heart out to ensure that civil rights and voting rights, equal rights, are enforced everywhere. These rights are not up to the states to decide. They are federal government's duty to decide. It's a constitutional question to protect the civil rights of every single American. And that's always been my position. And so that's why I ran for federal office in the first place. As Reverend Jackson may be one of the few people that knows, my city was the only city after Dr. King was assassinated that was almost burned to the ground, 20% of it. The only city in the United States of America since Reconstruction that was occupied by the National Guard with drawn bayonets on almost every corner for 10 months. I came home from law school that year, and I only had two political heroes, Dr. King and Bobby Kennedy, and they were both assassinated the year I graduated. And I came home and I had a job with one of the oldest law firms in the state, a prestigious firm. And after 5 months, I decided I couldn't do it, and I ended up leaving and becoming a public defender. When I was elected, one of the first things I did is to go on a committee to try to strengthen the Voting Rights Act. I co-sponsored the Equal Rights Amendment. I supported making the Equity Act in law and make the law of the land today. I voted for the Civil Rights Act of 1990 to ban employment discrimination. I wrote the provision in the law that allows the Attorney General to pursue cases involving, quote, a pattern or practice of conduct by law enforcement officers in violation of constitutional of federal rights. I wrote that law. And I used that power during the Obama-Biden administration. Our Department of Justice investigated police discrimination and abuse, including Ferguson. By the way, we worked like the devil to make sure that you should not allow police departments to buy excess military vehicles like up-armored Humvees and armored personnel carrier. You don't go into a neighborhood and police going in an up-armored Humvee or a personnel carrier. Our criminal justice reforms as President and Vice President reduced the federal population by 38,000 people. Ladies and gentlemen, in the Obama-Biden administration, we commuted more sentences than the president did than the 13 previous presidents combined. We passed a support. And by the way, with all due respect, I say to Chicagoans and everyone, my president gets much too little credit for all that he did. He was one of the great presidents of the United States of America. And I'm tired of hearing about what he didn't do. This man had a backbone like a ramrod. He had a backbone like a ramrod. You want to know what a man or woman's made of? Watch them under incredible pressure. He got elected as we were about to fall off a cliff. We went out and we had to pass an act that was Recovery Act, $800 billion. And guess what? Remember, he stood up on the, he loved in the State of the Union to turn and surprise me. He didn't tell me. He said, and Sheriff Joe's going to enforce the act. Well, thanks a lot, Mr. President. $800 billion. But we did it without less than 2% of waste, fraud, or abuse in that act. But here's what he did. Everything that landed on his desk, I watched him. I watched him. I sat with him every single morning, and I watched him for hundreds of hours in the so-called, the situation was not where Wolf Blitzer lives. The real situation. I watched him, and I want to tell you, Chicago, you had a great, great man out here, and he's still a great man, and he still has a lot to offer. We're in office, we passed a supportive discipline initiative to start to break the school-to-prison pipeline. Folks, the discussion in this race today shouldn't be about the past. We should be talking about how we can do better, how we can move forward, how we can give every child in America the opportunity for success stories. These aren't somebody else's children. They're our children. They're all our children. Not a joke. They're all our children. And they're the kite strings that lift our national ambitions aloft. We have to make people realize what you all are doing. What you're doing is every single child in America has enormous potential. Every single child has enormous potential. But it means you have to have good schools in every neighborhood. No child's future should be determined by their zip code. That's why I propose tripling funding for Title I schools to eliminate disparities between rich and poor school districts. We're going to increase teachers' pay. We're going to make pre-K absolutely a requirement across the board. Ladies and gentlemen, these teachers, they walk into school every day like my wife. She taught in the public school system, and now she teaches at the community college. She's never stopped teaching, by the way. She's the only second lady I ever know who's had a full-time job teaching 15 credits a semester. I don't know how, by the way, I'm known as Jill Biden's husband, and I'm proud of that. But I earned it. I had asked her 5 times to marry me before she'd do it. I don't know how that happened. Thank you, Lord. Anyway. Well, look. Those are your teachers in here. You know, you're expected to teach kids to read, write, add, and subtract. But guess what? Kids come to school with burdens and problems. We have too few school psychologists. We have too few social workers. We have too few people are in there doing what needs to be done to give kids a chance. And we're going to do that under my proposal. Look, we're going to reinstate the policies pushed during our administration to finish the work of desegregating our schools because we have a national interest in creating diverse school bodies. That's what I believe. We have to make sure that we're moving closer to the idea of America's founding. You know, we all learn in school, we hold these truths self-evident, that all men and women are created equal. Are we the people? We've never lived up to that. We've never lived up to that. And this is the 400th anniversary of the first African-American being brought to the shores of the United States enslaved. That's the original sin of this nation. But we've never walked away from it either. We've never walked away from the expectation. All of you in this room have never walked away from it. And look, there's only one president I know that's actually deliberately walked away from it. And that is Donald Trump. Not a joke. Think about this. I don't know about you, Jess, but I never thought that after all the progress had been made, I'd see people marching out of fields carrying torches, contorted faces, anger and hate, accompanied by white supremacists of the Ku Klux Klan, met by decent, honorable people who said, we don't hate here. And what happened? Clash ensued, a young woman died. And what did he say? When asked about it, he said, quote, no president's ever said this. There are very fine people in both groups. He has yet to apologize or criticize the Ku Klux Klan or the white supremacists. Look, we have a president who promotes hate and division, has encouraged the poison of white supremacy. Our children are watching. Barack was a president our kids not only could but did look up to. Look, what presidents say matters. It matters. And by the way, when we stay silent, our silence is complicity. That's what I learned from my dad. Your silence is complicity. You know, I promise you, if I get elected president, I will be a president who stands against racism, the forces of inclusion and intolerance everywhere in our society, in our institutions, in our voting booths, and in our hearts. It matters what we say. And since we're at a labor luncheon, it's important to stand by and start by recognizing Black, Hispanic, Asian American workers and Native American workers and the communities of color all across the nation that have driven and strengthened the labor movement from its beginnings, as you spoke about, Mr. President, a moment ago. From the Atlanta washerwoman strike in 1880 to the Delano grape strike and boycott in 1990, in the 1960s, from Bill Lucy and Bayard Rustin, Chicago's own Abby White and Jacqueline Vaughn. Black and brown power have always been an integral part of fighting for the right to organize, demanding equal pay, fair treatment, basic workers' protection, as my dad would say, some dignity. Taking on the fight of all workers, from farm workers to domestic workers, to tearing down systematic racism along the way. We owe them. We owe them big. We owe you. And if I'm elected president, I want you to know Labor will have an absolute full partner in the White House, and I think Labor knows that from me. Folks, a lot's changed very badly since we're out of office here. And this president and some members of the corporate community believe that, I want to make it clear to them, Wall Street did not build America. Stockbrokers and hedge fund managers did not build this country. You built this country. The great American middle class. The unions built the middle class. That's why it exists. And we need to rebuild it. But this time we have to bring everybody along, no matter their race, their gender, their ethnicity, their religion, who they love, where they live, or whether they have a disability. You know, my dad used to have an expression. He said, Joey, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck. And he meant it when he had to leave Scranton to go find work. He said, Joey, it's about your dignity. It's about respecting the community. It's about being able to look your child in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay, and mean it. Too few people, has been referenced today, too few people think they can say that anymore. A vast majority, for the first time in about 80 years, the vast majority of middle-class people are shrinking. They no longer believe their children will have the responsibility. Mr. President, you talked about how your dad persisted and changed things. They don't think they're, and today's corporate culture and this administration, they don't care about your dignity. Instead of investing back into our workers and record profits, instead of investing back in research and development to create more opportunities, corporate profits are going to pay dividends to shareholders and blockbuster executive compensation. Ladies and gentlemen, they're squeezing the life out of workers today. And by the way, and making it harder to meet very basic needs, stripping you of your personal dignity along the way. You know, there's long been a war on labor unions. And as pointed out today, Mr. Chairman, you all are coming back. But here's the deal. There's been another war going on that hadn't been noticed very much on the ability of individuals to be able to bargain for their self-worth. 40% of workers today have to sign a non-compete agreement. Now, it's one thing you have access to secrets of a great technical organization. You sign, I won't compete. One thing, if you have a business, I'm going to sell it, but I'm not going to open up next door when I sell it to you. But a significant portion of these people are hourly workers. Up until I started hollering about this, if you worked for Jimmy John's, you had to sign a non-compete agreement so you wouldn't walk across town and try to get 10 cents more from McDonald's. What's this all about? It's only one purpose. It's to hold down the ability of individuals even to bargain for their own self-worth. It's to keep wages low. And it's wrong. Too many companies today classify their workers as managers. When labor fought to make sure that if you're an hourly worker, you had to be paid overtime. Well, what do? If you're the person stacking spaghetti cans on top of a shelf in a supermarket, but you control the person who runs the forklift to bring it out, they say you're now a manager. Ladies and gentlemen, it cost more than 4 million hourly workers $1.2 billion last year. And where'd it go? It went back into the pocket of corporate America, back into so-called the job creators. Since when? Since when? The auto workers in my state who made all those automobiles that are gone, they're gone now. Since when were they not job creators? Today, the only people, Mr. Chairman, they think are job creators are stockholders. It's ridiculous. And look, speaking of overtime, it is long past time we have a $15 federal minimum wage. Long past time. And folks, No, it really is. And we're getting it done around the country. But folks, we need to build an economy that rewards work, not just wages, not just wealth. Wages have to be rewarded. Wages. You realize that people who are multimillionaires who pay only capital gains, they pay a lower tax rate than any of you all do? Look, if I'm elected president, I will immediately repeal the tax cuts for the super wealthy in this Trump administration. And you know, we have $1.6 trillion in loopholes that exist in the law now. $1.6 trillion. You can't justify the vast majority of that. And so, folks, look, what I'm going to do is use the money to invest in America's future. There's an incredibly long list of policies I don't have time, nor do you have an inclination to listen to me go through. But let me tell you something. We need an inclusive economy. From better access to capital for black-owned small businesses, to reducing the decline in black home ownership, to making sure homes in black communities are valued fairly. You realize the same home, I know you do, same home in a predominantly black neighborhood, the same exact home, and one in an overwhelmingly white neighborhood, in the black neighborhood, it's valued at significantly less, limiting your ability to borrow against it, limiting your ability to do much about it. And guess what? You pay a higher insurance rate, too, for it, even though it's less. Look, we need to reform the criminal justice to make sure black mothers feel confident when they send their son out on the street that he's going to be safe. We've got to recognize that kid wearing a hoodie may very well be the next poet laureate and not a gangbanger. Ladies and gentlemen, there are too many black men, and I might add women, in prison. And we started this to have a problem in our administration. We need to pass, I just met with Bobby Scott, you know Bobby well, Congresswoman, just met with Bobby Scott from Virginia, his Safe Justice Act. It needs to be passed, but he acknowledged we need to do more. No more minimum mandatory prison sentences, period. The end of private prisons, as Brock and I talked about. Funding. The original law I wrote, drug courts, at least $400 million a year. Bail reform. No one should be in jail because they don't have the money to pay their bail. No juveniles in adult prisons. Mandatory treatment, not jail, for those who are affected by and struggling with addiction. It makes no sense to put people in jail. Put them in treatment and keep them there while they are going through treatment. Decriminalize marijuana, automatically expunge marijuana convictions. Look, folks, and for finally, do what I've been trying to do for 15 years, end the crack powder cocaine disparity so it's 1-to-1, no different. Too many African Americans have been put in jail for it. Look, and prisons, what I don't get, and we just got to make the case, if you make it to ordinary people, they figure it out. In prison, you should receive an education, not how to be a better criminal, but you should learn how to read and write. There should be job programs in there. We should be training people. We should be training them. There should be automatic restoration of their rights once their sentence is served, including all rights to go to school, Pell Grants, not only a right to vote, not only a right to participate, but it's overwhelmingly the interest of the United States of America and every citizen, black or white or Hispanic, that you re-educate people, give them a chance. Folks, look, we can do all these things and so much more. We have to start by uniting the country. I know I get criticized for saying we can unite the country, but ladies and gentlemen, I refuse to accept the status quo. The status quo of this miserable, ugly politics we have today guarantees we'll continue to do the same. Guarantees it. We can't do it, and we can do it without ever compromising on our principles. You know, I know how the labor leaders movement has moved for decades. That's how we're going to win in 2020. And we're going to win together when we defeat Donald Trump. And folks, Rev, I've never been more optimistic about America's future, and I mean it. I mean it. You know, there's a, excuse me for quoting an Irish poet, my colleagues always kid me. The guy named Seamus Heaney wrote a poem called The Cure of Troy about the suppression of Catholics in Ireland. He wrote a poem, and he said, We're taught never to hope on this side of the grave. But then once in a lifetime, that longed-for tidal wave of justice rises up, and hope and history win. Folks, we're in a position now where the American people have seen the very dark side of America. Every generation is saying enough. We have a chance, a real chance. We have a chance if we stand up and remember who we are. This is the United States of America. There's nothing we've not been able to do if we're united in it. You know all those lines everybody remembers from John Kennedy's speeches about going to the moon? He said, this is a challenge we're unwilling. This is a challenge we are willing to accept. But the line I love most, he said, we are unwilling to postpone. We're unwilling to postpone. I am unwilling to postpone any longer to deal with the incredible opportunities we have. So ladies and gentlemen, we have to remember who we are, pick our heads up, work together, and God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you very much.
Vice President Joe Biden. We are not done yet. How many of you are hungry? Reverend Marvin Hunter, if you could come to the stage to give grace, bless the food. There is so much more to this program, so please keep your seats. Do not leave yet. And in the meantime, don't forget to Rainbow Push is on all platforms. Don't forget that on social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Visit rainbowpush.org for direct links and usernames. And we will be back in just a few moments. And if Reverend Hunter, he is making his way up here to bless the food.